All right, welcome to the Ravit Show. Super excited to be here with Philip, who's the CTO at Neo4j. Philip, welcome to the Ravit Show.
Thank you, Ravit. It's a pleasure to be here.
I recently shared your manifesto with our audience, and they've loved it. Thanks for writing this amazing manifesto.
And I love what you added to it, and particularly the graphic, which is incredible. I think it helps understand and reflect what GraphRAG is about.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm kind of curious to learn a little about the manifesto. Why did you write it? But just for our audience, would you like to quickly introduce yourself? Tell us more about why did you write the manifesto? What was the reason behind it? And because the community loves it.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Love your community. So a bit about myself. I'm CTO at Neo4j. I've been on the graph journey here with Neo4j for 12 years. Ran product as the first product manager back in 2012 when the company was 30 people. We're 800 and growing, and graphs is this big wave, right? Taking over the world. Here we are at Oracle Park, and what do you see? The logo there?
I love it.
I'll just leave that there.
Yeah.
So we had been seeing our customers using LLMs and then using vectors and then struggling and finding, it's still not good enough for whatever it is they're doing. And actually taking the graphs that they already had and the knowledge of Neo4j that they had, applying that, and then actually breaking through this barrier and getting into production. So we saw a lot of that. And then at kind of more or less at the same time, Microsoft Research published this amazing piece,
Yes.
Which I also recommend reading, on GraphRAG, and used the term GraphRAG, whereas we just talked about it as RAG with graphs. Like GraphRAG has kind of a nice ring to it. So
Yep.
after about a year of this, I felt like there'd been a lot that was written. A lot of it was very, very detailed. A lot of it was very high level. Let's all bring it together and put it in one place. So that's the motivation behind the GraphRAG Manifesto.
No, thanks for doing that. And it kind of, obviously the manifesto kind of also helps us to understand and get into more of the depth. But I have a curious question about, the difference between GraphRAG versus the traditional RAG. I know the manifesto kind of talks a lot about it, but I'm kind of curious to learn it firsthand from you and just for our audience.
Yeah, so I guess if you look at GraphRAG versus RAG, those two aren't mutually exclusive, right? But you said traditional RAG, which means usually with vectors. So
Yeah.
what you have in common is retrieval augmented generation, right? It's this technique where you want to inform the LLM with the latest up-to-date data that reflects your domain and things that the LLM wasn't trained on. And you can do that with vectors, and that gives you access to like one algorithm, maybe generously to like two different kinds of similarity, angular and spatial. And what GraphRAG does is it's potentially inclusive of traditional RAG. So you could do normal vectors, and then you could say, I'm going to rank the vectors using a graph algorithm.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to do a graph traversal and then do vector search based on that. Or I'm just going to do graph traversal and retrieve data based on that. So it's just using a graph database as part of your RAG pipeline.
Yeah, no, I think those are fantastic insights. Thanks for sharing that. It kind of gives us a more clarification on GraphRAG and how it kind of operates as well. I also want to know a little about how do knowledge graphs improve Gen AI performance? Because that's something important. I'm pretty sure our audience always loves to learn a little about, when it's the Gen AI, how does it fuel the game?
Yeah, so I guess let's talk about performance, and I'll break it down into three
Yes.
things. Because in an enterprise, you need LLMs usually to have not just accurate results, but actually useful results, right?
Yeah.
So that's one, is kind of this domain of accuracy, completeness, answer quality. The second is everything around privacy, security, auditability, governance. So these are maybe non-functional requirements, let's say, but that are also very important. And then you also want to be able to develop fast and understand what you're developing. And GraphRAG helps with all three. So first, you actually get better results, not just more accurate.
Yeah.
You can refer to the graph, which is, I think of it like as a digital twin of the world, or like the part of the world that is relevant to your domain. It's what is the part of my world model that I want to incorporate and have detailed prescriptive knowledge about, and then give access to my GenAI pipeline to that data to bring back more precise results. So a common example that's out on GitHub, you can find it in our training, is I'm going to bring in SEC data from this Edgar database, which is like S1 filings for public companies, and then vectorize it, but also ingest it into a graph, and then ask the question, what companies are most likely to be impacted by a lithium shortage, or what asset managers are most likely to be impacted by a lithium shortage? The vector answer is accurate. It says it's companies that use batteries and have batteries in their products and so on. The graph answer gives you 10 companies. So like that's $1 billion query if I'm a hedge fund manager and there was just heard that there was a shortage over the wire. From an explainability perspective, we can understand graphs in a way that we can't understand vectors. Like, you've probably looked at a vector.
Right.
A vector is just like a whole bunch of numbers, and I can't really make heads or tails of it. Nor can a machine in some ways, other than through, if I have two, I do similarity.
Yeah.
So you can understand the graph better, and then you can apply fine-grained access controls and use the graph as a hook. So I'd say those are the ways that GraphRAG adds value.
No, I think those are amazing insights and kind of great examples that you kind of shared with us. Kind of also gives us a more in-depth about, how it kind of all works. So thanks for that. I'm also curious to learn a little about how, what impact will GraphRags have on AI and data management? Because that's something, the data community would love to know as well.
Yeah, let me actually, I break it out down into two.
Yes,
parts. So
sure.
How does GraphRAG impact AI?
Yeah.
I think that one is through the three things that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Raising the bar for what's possible with Gen AI applications so that more can get to production. Like we just heard this morning at our GraphSummit, according to an IBM survey, only 71% of Gen AI applications haven't made it to production, so less than a third have. So it's raising that bar.
Yep.
How do knowledge graphs impact your data pipelines and your overall processes and your Gen AI quality? Turns out knowledge graphs can also be used for things like data lineage, to store resolved entities. So I'd say knowledge graphs, in addition to being a basis for GraphRAG, can serve as a basis for honing the quality of your data that you're using more broadly for AI.
Yep.
Including things like lineage. How does data flow from this system to this system? What's the quality, timeliness, et cetera? So knowledge graphs have broader applicability in AI than just GraphRAG.
Yeah.
But GraphRAG is super impactful in and of itself.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic that you shared about that. I'm also kind of curious to know a little about, the challenges that companies face in adopting GraphRags, because I know there are a lot of customers who are already using it, but there could be challenges as well.
Yeah.
Would you like to share a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge that I hear about is, all right, my data's not in a graph yet.
Yeah.
How do I get it into a graph, right?
True.
So there's this whole new kind of like greenfield opportunity that's been rapidly evolving of using LLMs to help construct a graph out of unstructured text.
Okay.
It turns out, though, that our minds often go straight to unstructured text when thinking about this problem. Oftentimes, you actually have data that is structured, that's in a relational database.
Yes.
That has the kinds of keywords you're looking for and the relationships among them. So like, the taxonomy or ontology. So this is things like your product hierarchy and your product names.
Yeah.
Which then you can tell the LLM, look for these things, and like when I find those, then assign those, to make those a label or make those a property. So you can get a lot of guidance from your structured data towards building out unstructured text. So typically my recommendation is, if you've got some structured data that represents maybe some of the keywords or kind of things you're looking for.
Right.
Bring that in first, and then you can use LLMs, and there are lots of blog posts out there with examples. Rapidly evolving area, and I've even seen some specialized vendors out there.
Yeah.
Who are tackling graph construction. So that's the biggest challenge, biggest opportunity. And then once you have your data in the graph, things get a lot easier and more powerful.
Yes, I think you've kind of mentioned an amazing point here. With enterprises, I think that's one big challenge. But at the same time, it's a good opportunity to get to the next level. So thanks for that, Philip. Also, one more thing that I would like to ask is about if you have any real world cases that you would like to share, any use case that comes to your mind, would love to know.
Let me talk about two. So one is Klarna's CEO went public on the Sequoia training data podcast and actually revealed that this, famous LLM application that's been much publicized that's used by them uses GraphRAG and uses Neo4j.
Nice. Wow.
So that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
It was nice to be outed there.
Yeah, exactly.
By the CEO, no less. Another one is, not many companies are yet willing to share too much because it's a competitive advantage,
yes.
To be first. But there's this company called Data Squared
nice.
that we've got a use case with. They basically serve investigators who work for law enforcement agencies who are looking for a smart sparring partner to help get to the bottom of various crimes and so on. And so they actually feed data out of the knowledge graph to an LLM to make it better, more clueful. And that's made a transformative difference for their entire offering.
Yeah, no, I think thanks for sharing that. And
lots more stories.
Lots more stories. I know. I can, obviously here at the GraphSummit itself, I can see so many customers coming in. Such good panel discussion, such good discussion around, the real implementation. And obviously they spoke about the challenges, but then they spoke about, the real achievement that they could actually get from the RAG, right? So,
and we just specifically heard Gilead, Electronic Arts, Deloitte, Palo Alto Networks.
Exactly.
So these are companies you all probably use their products or have heard of them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I meant for audience, but thanks for naming them. So awesome. Also, I'm kind of wanting to know about the future a little bit. So where do you see, how is it evolving in the future, GraphRAG? Where do you see it going for, the larger enterprises or in general?
One of the magic things about graphs that I've observed over my decade plus working and helping customers with them, once you have some data in the graph, then oftentimes that data solves not only the problem you thought you were going to solve, but it can also solve other problems. Or maybe it's 90% of the data that I need to solve some other problems, and I just can add a little bit more data to my graph, and the graph becomes more valuable, the other data set becomes more valuable, I can solve more problems. I think of this as data network effects, also use case network effects. And so where, if to the degree that you have a graph and the excuse or, reason for putting the graph together is GraphRAG, expect to see a lot of unexpected benefits down the line. I think that's going to be the magical thing people discover. You're going to invest in creating the knowledge graph, and it's a little bit of work up front, but then it pays dividends in the long run.
So watch out for the space for sure. It's gonna help you a lot. Those I'm pretty sure those enterprises who kind of looking at one problem, they might actually solve 5 different problems in the future. So that's the power of GraphRAG. But then one last question for our audience, Philip. I know there's a manifesto. They can definitely go out, and I'm gonna share a link for them to read. If they want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn a best place? Where can they reach out?
Find me on LinkedIn, Philip Rathle. There's just one of me. And if you say Neo4j,
it's going to be
also
easy to find.
just one of me, but easier to find.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. But this was such insightful conversation. Thanks for doing this, Philip. I know you have customers. I've just got you from a busy event here, but then it is such a pleasure chatting with you on the Ravit Show today.
It's a real pleasure. Wonderful to be here with you, and thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.